I stared at the certified letter in disbelief. Notice of covenant violation, unauthorized property modification. My hands trembled with anger as I read further. The solar panels I'd spent my life savings on, the ones cutting my electric bill by 70% and powering my modest home with clean energy, were apparently visually disruptive to neighborhood aesthetics, and not pre-approved by the architectural committee. I had 30 days to remove them or face daily fines of $100. The letter was signed with a flourishing signature. Karen Westfield, President, Sunnyside Estates HOA. This wasn't just about solar panels. This was war. My name is Harrison Riordan, Harry to my friends. After 15 years in the Marine Corps and 2 tours in Afghanistan, I'd saved enough to buy my first home in Sunnyside Estates. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. A small 3-bedroom ranch with a yard where I could finally plant the vegetable garden I dreamed about during those long desert nights. I'd done my homework before installing those panels. California's Solar Rights Act protected homeowners like me, but HOAs often ignored the law, counting on residents being too intimidated or financially strapped to fight back. What they didn't count on was a stubborn ex-Marine who'd faced worse enemies than a power-hungry HOA president. The next day, I walked into the HOA office, letter in hand. The receptionist, a young woman named Tara, gave me a sympathetic smile. "Here to see Karen?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes, ma'am." "Good luck," she whispered as she picked up the phone. "Mrs. Westfield? Mr. Riordan is here about his situation." Karen Westfield emerged from her office like a shark smelling blood in the water. Her blonde bob was immaculately styled, not a hair out of place. Her cream-colored pantsuit probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her smile was practiced but never reached her eyes. "Mr. Riordan, what a pleasure," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Come into my office." I followed her in, noting the framed photos on her wall, Karen with local politicians, Karen cutting ribbons at community events, Karen accepting awards. This was a woman who collected power like baseball cards. "So you've received our notice," she said, settling behind her desk. "I understand these things can be upsetting, but rules are rules. Ms. Westfield, I've reviewed both state law and our HOA covenants. California clearly protects my right to install solar panels." She waved her hand dismissively. "The board has determined that your installation violates our aesthetic standards. The panels are visible from the street. That's because that's where the sun is," I said evenly. "And the Solar Rights Act specifically addresses this." Her smile tightened. "Mr. Riordan, let me be frank. Our community has standards. Your military background may not have prepared you for the nuances of suburban living. These rules protect everyone's property values." The way she said military background made it sound like a communicable disease. "I'm not removing the panels," I stated. She leaned forward. "Then we'll have no choice but to begin levying fines. Which, I should mention, can become property liens if left unpaid." As I left her office, I heard her on the phone. "Linda? It's Karen." "Yes, the ex-soldier with those ghastly panels." "No, he's being difficult. We may need to make an example of him." I paused in the hallway, my training kicking in. Something about this felt personal, targeted. Why was she so determined to make me take down my solar panels when 3 other homes in Sunnyside had them too? On my way out, Tara slipped me a sticky note. "Check public records for Westfield Energy Holdings," she whispered. And that's when things got interesting. Back home, I booted up my laptop and started digging. Karen Westfield's husband, Jeffrey Westfield, was CEO of a regional utility company that had been lobbying against residential solar for years. The same company had donated heavily to local politicians who opposed solar tax credits. But the real bombshell came when I discovered Westfield Energy Holdings, a shell company that owned 51% of our property management firm. The Westfields were using HOA rules to protect their energy business interests. I printed everything, then called my neighbor, Lily Garrison. Lily was a retired corporate attorney who'd moved to Sunnyside after her husband passed. She'd helped me navigate some of the HOA's more absurd rules when I first moved in. "This is blatantly illegal," Lily said, reviewing my findings over coffee the next morning. "It's a conflict of interest at minimum, possibly fraud. But taking on the Westfields won't be easy. They have deep pockets and deeper connections." "I don't care," I said. "They can't get away with this." Lily studied me thoughtfully. "You know, there might be a way to beat them at their own game. How committed are you to fighting this?" "All in," I replied without hesitation. "Then we need to talk to Howard Mitchell." Howard was a long-time resident and former board member who'd been mysteriously removed last year after questioning some of Karen's financial decisions. He lived 3 doors down from me in a meticulously maintained Tudor-style house. That evening, we gathered in Howard's study. The walls were lined with books and framed maps. Howard, a distinguished man in his 70s with a shock of white hair, listened intently as I explained the situation. "I'm not surprised," he said when I finished. "Karen's been manipulating the HOA for years. Last year, I started asking questions about some unusual expenditures, consulting fees to companies I couldn't find any information about. Next thing I knew, I was voted off the board for creating a hostile environment." "Do you still have those financial records?" Lily asked. Howard smiled. "I have copies of everything. I may be old, but I'm not stupid. I knew something wasn't right." He pulled out a folder filled with HOA financial statements, contracts, and board meeting minutes. Together, we spent hours connecting dots. The picture that emerged was disturbing. Karen had been using the HOA as her personal piggy bank. Those mysterious consulting companies? They all traced back to relatives or friends. Landscaping contracts were awarded to her brother-in-law's company at inflated prices. The Community Improvement Fund had somehow funded renovations to her personal home. But most damning of all was the property management arrangement. The HOA was paying exorbitant fees to a management company controlled by the Westfield Shell Corporation. "This is embezzlement," Lily said quietly. "Plain and simple." "So we take this to the police?" I asked. Howard shook his head. "The local police chief plays golf with Jeffrey Westfield every Sunday. We need more leverage." Lily tapped her pen thoughtfully against her legal pad. "What we need is control of the HOA. The annual meeting and board elections are in 3 weeks. If we could get enough homeowners to vote against Karen's slate of candidates." "She controls the proxy votes," Howard explained. "Most residents don't attend the meetings and just sign over their voting rights. Karen's been collecting those proxies for years." That's when a crazy idea hit me. What if we didn't need to vote her out? What if we actually owned the HOA? They both looked at me like I'd suggested flying to the moon. "The HOA is technically a non-profit corporation," I continued. "But the property management company that runs it is for profit. And that company is owned by Westfield Energy Holdings. What if we buy controlling interest in that company?" Lily's eyes widened. "That would be expensive. I have my military pension and some savings," I said. "But you're right, it wouldn't be enough." Howard was quiet for a moment. "I might know someone who could help. My nephew James Mitchell. He runs a venture capital firm specializing in clean energy. He's been looking for ways to demonstrate how solar can work in residential communities." One phone call later, and we had a tentative ally. James was intrigued by our situation and the potential for turning Sunnyside into a showcase for residential solar. He agreed to meet us the following week. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't wasting any time. The next morning, I found a final notice, taped to my door. Apparently, the first notice had been the final one too. Now I had just 2 weeks to remove my solar panels or face legal action. That afternoon, I noticed a white van parked outside my house. A man in a suit was taking photographs of my property. When I approached him, he quickly got back in his van and drove away. The intimidation campaign had begun. Over the next few days, I received anonymous notes in my mailbox warning me that I was bringing down property values. My garbage cans were mysteriously knocked over. Someone called in a noise complaint when I was quietly reading on my back porch. But Karen had underestimated me. I'd survived 2 tours in war zones. Her petty harassment wasn't going to break me. James Mitchell arrived the following Tuesday, looking every bit the successful venture capitalist in his tailored suit and Tesla Model S. We met at Lily's house to avoid attracting attention. "So let me get this straight," James said after reviewing our evidence. "This HOA president is using her position to block solar installations because her husband's energy company sees them as competition?" "That's just the tip of the iceberg," Lily explained, showing him the financial documentation. "She's been using HOA funds for personal benefit and steering contracts to friends and family." James whistled low. "That's securities fraud if the management company has outside investors. Have you looked into who else owns shares?" We hadn't. More digging revealed that Westfield Energy Holdings owned 51%, but the remaining 49% was split among various small investors, including a local teachers' pension fund. "That's our angle," James said. "If we can convince those smaller investors that the company's current management is putting them at legal risk, they might be willing to sell." He made a few calls. By Friday, we had tentative commitments from several shareholders representing 30% of the company. Combined with the 10% James was willing to purchase himself, we needed just another 12% to take control. The answer came from an unexpected source. Tara, the HOA receptionist, contacted me through Lily. "Karen fired me yesterday," she explained, sitting nervously in Lily's living room. "She said I was disloyal because I wouldn't spy on certain residents, meaning you and Mrs. Garrison." "I'm sorry about your job," I said sincerely. "Don't be. I hated working for her. But here's what you don't know. My grandmother owns 15% of Summit Property Management." My jaw dropped. "Your grandmother?" "Margaret Donovan. She was one of the original investors when the company formed 20 years ago. She's been trying to sell her shares for years, but Karen and Jeffrey always blocked it, claiming first right of refusal. But Grandma's lawyer says that provision expired last year." Things moved quickly after that. James's legal team drew up the necessary paperwork, and within 2 weeks, we had secured 55% ownership of Summit Property Management. The Westfields didn't know what hit them. We'd conducted all negotiations through shell companies of our own. The annual HOA meeting was scheduled for Saturday at the community center. I arrived early, nodding to Lily and Howard, who were already seated near the front. The room filled quickly. Word had spread that something unusual was happening. Karen arrived last, making an entrance in a red power suit, her husband Jeffrey trailing behind her. She looked surprised at the turnout but quickly recovered, tapping the microphone with manicured nails. "Welcome, everyone, to our annual Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association meeting. We have a full agenda today, beginning with point of order," James interrupted, standing up from the back row. "Before we proceed, I'd like to announce a change in management." Karen's smile froze. "Excuse me? And you are?" "James Mitchell, CEO of Horizon Ventures and new majority shareholder of Summit Property Management." He walked to the front of the room, handing her a folder. "Effective immediately, Summit Property Management will be undergoing a complete restructuring. All current management contracts with Sunnyside Estates HOA are terminated." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Karen's face turned as red as her suit as she flipped through the documents. "This is preposterous. You can't just— Actually, we can," Lily said, joining James at the front. "As the controlling interest in the management company, we have every right to terminate the contracts, especially given the evidence of financial impropriety we've uncovered." Jeffrey Westfield stood up. "What evidence? These are baseless accusations." Howard calmly walked to the projector and plugged in a flash drive. On the screen appeared spreadsheets, bank transfers, and emails, all documenting years of self-dealing and financial misconduct. "We've forwarded all of this to the State Attorney General's office, the IRS, and the Securities and Exchange Commission," Howard announced. "Their investigators should be contacting you shortly." The color drained from the Westfields' faces. It was my turn now. I stood up and faced my neighbors. For years, this HOA has been run like a personal fiefdom, enriching a few at the expense of many. That ends today. We're proposing a new board, new bylaws, and a new approach that respects homeowners' rights, including the right to install solar panels. The meeting erupted in applause. Many residents had their own stories of Karen's petty tyranny, and they were more than happy to vote for change. By the end of the meeting, we had a new board, with Lily as president, new management, with James's company overseeing the transition, and a new set of bylaws that specifically protected solar rights. As for Karen, she tried to flee the meeting but was met at the door by two serious-looking individuals who identified themselves as FBI agents investigating wire fraud and racketeering. The look on her face as they escorted her to their waiting car was worth every penny we'd spent taking control of the HOA. The following Monday, I was enjoying my morning coffee on the front porch, admiring how the sun glinted off my perfectly legal solar panels, when Lily walked over with a newspaper. "Thought you might enjoy this," she said, handing it to me with a smile. The headline read, "HOA President and Utilities CEO Charged in Fraud Scheme." Below it was Karen's mugshot, her perfect bob now decidedly less perfect. "So what's next for you, Harry?" Lily asked, settling into the chair beside me. "Now that you've toppled a corrupt HOA president and revolutionized our neighborhood governance." I laughed. "I think I'll just enjoy my solar panels and maybe finally plant that vegetable garden. After all, the new HOA bylaws specifically encourage sustainable landscaping." 6 months later, Sunnyside Estates had transformed. Solar panels adorn almost half the homes. Our community garden, established on previously unused HOA land, was thriving. Property values had actually increased as the neighborhood gained recognition for its sustainability initiatives. James's company used us as a case study for how green energy and sensible governance could coexist in planned communities. Several neighboring HOAs had adopted our bylaws as templates for their own reforms. And me? I was just happy to be left alone with my solar panels, my vegetables, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, with enough determination and the right allies, you can fight City Hall, or in this case, buy it outright. Karen and Jeffrey Westfield eventually pled guilty to reduced charges. They avoided prison time but paid substantial restitution and were banned from serving in any corporate governance roles. Last I heard, they'd moved to Florida. As for Tara, she became our new HOA administrator, running the office with transparency and actual customer service. Her grandmother finally retired comfortably on the proceeds from selling her shares. Sometimes, when I'm working in my garden underneath those solar panels that started it all, I think about how one small act of resistance grew into something much bigger. It wasn't just about winning a battle with a power-hungry HOA president. It was about showing that ordinary people, working together, can stand up to entrenched power and actually win. That's a lesson worth all the solar panels in California.